Hello, everyone. How is everybody doing? Hopefully, you are preparing for your Thanksgiving. But let's get into this video, honey. We got to talk about Donald Trump. MAGA is failing. Donald Trump is losing every way but the right way because his lies is coming to an end. And everybody is pretty much regretting that they voted for this criminal. Okay. Now, if you guys don't know, he maliciously went out and, attempted to get two individuals locked up, thrown in jail simply because he just don't like them. Now, isn't that crazy how a person with 34 felonies, I believe, or 36, we definitely don't want to give Donald Trump any credit, with those many felonies is out here maliciously trying to put somebody else in jail. Well, thanks to the good old judge that said, get this bull crap out of my court. I don't want to hear from you, Donald Trump. This is out of here. So let's get into it because, again, Donald Trump and MAGA are running scared with their lies and all of their criminal activity. So let's get into this judge that actually dismissed these cases.
We have learned that the Justice Department's case against former FBI Director Jim Comey and the New York Attorney General have both been dismissed. CNN's Caitlin Polance is covering this. Caitlin, okay, what happened here? I don't know which case you want to take first.
Well, they both are being dismissed, and for essentially the same reason that Lindsey Halligan, the Eastern District of Virginia interim U.S. attorney sent there by Donald Trump, not Senate confirmed, that she doesn't have the power. What the judge here has found, this is Judge Cameron Currie from South Carolina. She came into the district, heard arguments from both of the lawyers on these cases against Lindsey Halligan's role. They argued that she didn't have the power because she wasn't Senate confirmed, and thus these indictments are invalid. The judge is agreeing with that. Judge Currie is saying that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid. And because Ms. Halligan had no lawful authority to present the indictment, James Comey's motion is granted, the indictment is dismissed. Now, the judge does mention that this is without prejudice. So in legal speak, that means that it could be brought back by another prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia if they took it through the grand jury again. But everything Lindsey Halligan did at the end of September, beginning of October, and since then, this judge is saying she couldn't have done that. She didn't have the authority. She was not confirmed by Congress, by the U.S. Senate as the Eastern District of Virginia's U.S. attorney. And thus, the president went out of his bounds, and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, also overstepped her bounds in sending Lindsey Halligan into this district to get these indictments against both Comey and James.
And can I raise a question with Comey? I know that she had made, at least the judge pointed out, a serious error when it came to the grand jury. So what we're saying now is even that mistake that everyone had been talking about, it's moot, because essentially what I'm hearing you say is they're saying she shouldn't have been in the job in the first place.
It may be moot, yes. We still are waiting to see if Judge Nachmanoff, the presiding judge over this case, what he does. He hasn't actually entered into the record yet that the cases are dismissed. We just have this other order from the judge saying that the indictment against James should be dismissed. The indictment against Comey should be dismissed. We'll see what this other judge does now with that. But this isn't about, Audie, what you are bringing up, what Lindsey Halligan may have done with the grand jury in getting the indictment of James Comey through to the magistrate judge after they had voted down one of the charges against Comey and only secured two charges against him. There was that big hiccup, but it isn't what's being addressed here. This is solely about, did the Department of Justice formally take the pains it needed to get someone into the position of U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia? And this judge, Judge Currie, she says they did not. And so everything that interim U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan has done, it's invalid at this time.
Does this mean this is done? Can these charges come back?
Hadi, there are always appeals. This is at the district court level, and so it is very likely that whatever happens next will be kicking around in appeals for months, if not years.
Okay, thanks so much, Caitlin. I want to bring it to the panel now. Obviously, the administration really wanted to have the lawyers they wanted to have in place, usually people from Trump's teams in the past, to go after these figures. And I know Comey had planned in his defense to talk about vindictive prosecution. Now it didn't even get that far. How does this look? I don't know what some of the reaction here is.
I mean, it's kind of predictable in a way. Shortly after the Comey indictment landed, we saw people talk about whether Halligan was actually lawfully prosecuted. And just to be clear, this wasn't some kind of lefty legal commentator who was raising this. This was Ed Whelan of the National Review, who I think initially really raised this as an issue. So there were so many different issues with these prosecutions. It was kind of a question of which one was really going to be the one to get in the way.
Well, then let's see how the White House is taking it. CNN's Kristen Holmes is there. Kristen, what are you hearing?
Well, we're waiting to hear some kind of response here. Nothing from President Trump yet, nothing from the White House. But of course, we have reached out. But just a reminder, the White House has been heavily involved in almost all of this. Part of the reason that these charges were brought against Comey, were brought against Letitia James, was because President Trump wanted to have his political foes brought to court. And that's what we saw unfold over the last several months. We know that the U.S. attorney who was in the Southern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, was not willing to bring these cases. He's becoming a problem for President Trump. He was becoming kind of a thorn in his side. And then eventually he was ousted from that position. He was forced to resign. He's no longer in there. Then we saw President Trump be very involved in the appointment of Lindsey Halligan, to the point where he was posting on Truth Social a direct note to Attorney General Pam Bondi saying that Lindsey Halligan would be a good fit. Halligan herself had been a personal attorney, but she had never appeared before a grand jury ever before this Comey indictment. She was prepared by the FBI attorneys. That's who kind of did murder boards with her and practice rounds with her. And then she did the Comey indictment. And then almost on a whim, from what I'm told by officials, she decided she would also bring these charges against Letitia James in Alexandria just a few weeks ago, which of course then ended up in an indictment there. The White House is going to have a lot to say about this, I am certain, because they have been involved in every single step of this as it has unfolded. And this, bringing these kind of charges against President Trump's political enemies, that is something that he cares deeply about. So that is something that we expect to hear from him on.
Okay, thanks so much, Kristen. I want to come back to Caitlin Polans, who's been following the legal aspects of this. Are you getting more detail?
Yeah, Audie, I was able to read the 26 pages very quickly that Judge Currie wrote in both of these cases, James and Comey. They're essentially the same thing that she's articulating, that Lindsey Halligan, the Eastern District U.S. Attorney, placed there on an interim basis by the executive branch, that she didn't have the power to bring these. And what she is citing, the judge here, the very last thing she says in this opinion is she's invalidating the acts performed by Ms. Halligan and dismissing the indictments, returning Ms. James to the status she occupied before being indicted, which was not being an employee of the Justice Department. She was in the White House. And she cites the case U.S. v. Trump. So that is the nail in the coffin at this point in time for these two cases. The decision made by Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida last year that the case against Donald Trump related to his alleged mishandling of classified documents, that could not go forward. The judge is saying in this case that James and Comey, they cannot face these charges because the prosecutor was invalid, and she is basing that, according to this order, this 26-page order, largely upon the Trump case, which Donald Trump won and which freed him from being a criminal defendant as he was taking office this year. In that case, that was a case brought by special counsel Jack Smith, and the judge there in Florida, a Trump appointee, Eileen Cannon, she also found that the steps that prosecutor had taken were invalid. He had not been properly appointed. So a really interesting correlation there between these two situations.
And again, just so we're clear, it's not on any of the big merits of the case people had wondered about whether this was vindictive, whether it was revenge, all of these other things. In the end, it's like the people who are supposed to be in these jobs are not in these jobs. Can you remind us what that case that Cannon had ruled on last year comes into play here? What aspects of it?
Yeah, it specifically is the aspect of the prosecutor. In that case was about Trump allegedly mishandling classified documents. But the person who took that indictment through the grand jury, it was Jack Smith, who was brought into the Justice Department to be a special counsel and hold that office. At the time, Judge Cannon dismissed that case last year, saying that Jack Smith, he wasn't approved by Congress to have that job, and Congress hadn't appropriated him the money. That case was dismissed, and then he won the presidency, prompting the Justice Department to put not just that case by Jack Smith, but another one he had brought against Trump in Washington, D.C. On ice, dismiss them. They're not having Trump as a criminal defendant. And so in this case, it's very similar. It is about, did the Justice Department and the executive branch do the things it needed to do? And did Congress approve this prosecutor being in this job? Judge Currie here in the James case, in the James Comey case, the Letitia James case, she's saying, no, Congress did not give the authority to this prosecutor, Lindsey Halligan, in the Eastern District of Virginia, and that is why it is being tossed at this time. She is quite clear here, though, that these indictments need to be dismissed, but she is saying that another prosecutor who appropriately is given the authority by Congress at this point in time could try and revive these cases if they wanted to. That was a very similar thing to what happened in the Trump case as well, where it was dismissed and there was always the possibility that it could come back with another prosecutor, but just not that one. And here, just not this one. Howdy.
Okay, Caitlin, thanks so much. Caitlin bringing to us kind of a political question there at the end, right? I mean, if there's one thing this administration has not been like that interested in doing, it's going to Congress for approval of something. I don't know if this will have implications going forward, but Elena, what do you see and sort of how this is playing out?
I mean, wow, the way Caitlin broke that down. This is very processy.
It is.
But I mean, one, I think the president's going to be furious. I'd remind everyone, remember when he was accidentally posted a personal message, I was told it was supposed to be a text message to Attorney General Pam Bondi saying, Pam, why aren't we prosecuting Comey and Letitia James? Everyone is wondering, we got to get on that. I think you can see how this is going to land with him. I think one of the things Caitlin said earlier, I think Kristen alluded to it as well. I totally agree with this idea that they're going to appeal this. They're going to fight this. This is one.
Well, of course, they're going to appeal it. They're going to fight it. But I don't know if this is going to really go anywhere because, I mean, for some reason with this administration, they tend to not follow the laws or the rules. They just make up stuff as they go along. Okay. So what has happened in this case is the reason why this was pretty much dismissed is simple because the person that Donald Trump, asked to go and, prosecute this case, they were essentially illegally appointed. So the person that was previous in that particular position declined and said that they would not pursue this case. These cases, because they just said that it just wasn't, the evidence wasn't there. Of course, the evidence wasn't there because, we're dealing with a child in the White House who pretty much just want to go after everybody he don't like, right? So this has nothing to do with if these people broke the law. We have a whole child in the White House who wants to use the resources, the FBI, and all of these people to avenge the people that he don't like. So this was pretty much dismissed because you have a person in a position that they're not supposed to be in there. They were not confirmed. Probably don't have enough education. Y'all know how it go with these people. They just do whatever the hell they want to do. But something that we're missing here is one of the things they brought up in court was vindictive prosecution. Now, it wasn't even dismissed on the grounds of vindictive prosecution, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the first thing is the entire prosecution should have never been brought forth because this woman should not even be in a position. She wasn't confirmed. If you guys were following it, what you also learned is the dingbat actually presented something to the judge And it was never, all of the charges were not even confirmed by the grand jury. So she was definitely an amateur and didn't know what the hell she was doing. Now, let's get into what vindictive prosecution is. Now, vindictive prosecution is the unconstitutional practice of a prosecutor retaliating against a defendant for exercising their legal rights, such as by increasing charges or filing new ones. This violates due process rights and can be difficult to prove, as the defendants must show that the prosecutor's action was motivated pretty much by bullshit. And guess what they have? They actually have that message that dumb Donald Trump put out. Was it on Truth Social? Whatever it was. But he sent it out to the world because he's such a deranged lunatic that, his brain cells is a little bit off. He actually put this stuff out in the universe. He thought he was texting somebody because he's crazy like that. And he put it out to the world. And the message said, hey, when we gonna put these folks in jail? That is given very much malicious prosecution. So they haven't even gotten to that part. What they pretty much said is, get this out of here. You did not have the right to bring these charges, girl, because you ain't even supposed to be working here. Okay. Clear and cut. But of course, they're going to bring the charges back. And I'm sure it's going to get thrown out on vindictive prosecution, because why is the bozo president involved in somebody getting charges? Don't he have something else to do? I mean, like making America great again, because it sure the hell ain't great. People done lost their jobs. They done got fired. People hungry. They ain't finna have medical insurance. And he is sending messages saying, hey, by the way, girl, don't forget to prosecute these folks. What a whole entire idiot. Okay. Wait a minute, y'all.
Officially I am Andy Mack. We're following some breaking news as a judge on Monday officially dismissed the criminal charges against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. We're following this closely here on Live Now from Fox. Some breaking news that the ruling from the U.S. District Judge halts, at least for now, a pair of prosecutions that had hastened concerns that the Justice Department was being weaponized to pursue the president's political adversaries, as the judge concluded that the prosecutor who brought the charges at President Trump's urging was illegally appointed by the Justice Department. So very interesting kind of dynamic in this.
Illegally appointed. Now, I know, a lot of y'all in the chat are ignorant because you don't even know what illegal means. You want me to tell you? I mean, I don't necessarily have to look it up, because I know, you guys are so ignorant that you support Donald Trump regardless to what he does. And unfortunately, MAGA is dying. Yeah, MAGA is dying. As a matter of fact, MAGA isn't dying. MAGA is dead, ho.
Let's bring into the conversation right now former federal prosecutor, friend of the program, Nima Rahmani. Nima, thank you so much for joining us. We talked last week, I believe, about potential misconduct by the prosecutor. This one's a different kind of area that the defense was trying to get it thrown out due to the appointment of Lindsey Halligan. What do we make of this development?
It's a huge development today, Andy. Probably one of the biggest decisions involving the Constitution's appointments clause. And this is what it says. So going back to our political science, U.S. history in high school and college, we know that certain officers of the United States, they have to be appointed by the president and
Yes, you have to be appointed by the cuckoo president, and you have to be confirmed. But when you didn't make it in college because you was so dumb, right? Because your professor said Donald Trump was one of the dumbest people he had ever met. I mean, you just go and put people in jobs. I mean, the lady ain't even been confirmed. Y'all are so ignorant. Like, a toddler knows that you just can't just put people in these jobs and not have them confirmed. But of course, MAGA thinks this because MAGA, like Donald Trump said, is the uneducated, right? Let's get into it. MAGA is dead.
Clause. And this is what it says. So going back to our political science, U.S. history in high school and college, we know that certain officers of the United States, they have to be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Obviously, there's been some gridlock in the Senate. So the law does allow for interim appointments of U.S. attorneys. So the U.S. attorney is the head prosecutor in any judicial district. And the law says that there can be an interim appointment for 120 days. That appointment can be made by the attorney general. After that, if there is no Senate confirmed nominee, then the district judges in that district get to choose the U.S. attorney. So what happened here, Andy, is you have Lindsey Halligan. She is the second interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. Why does that matter? Well, the first appointee, his name was Eric Siebert. He was appointed. He was actually ultimately appointed again by the judges in the district, but he resigned rather than present the Comey charges to the grand jury. So
now you guys do know what resign mean. Do I need to break that down for you little honeys in the chat? Because I know your IQ is like 0. What does resign mean? Resign means this person quit, left, they're gone. So previous people in this role refused to bring prosecution against these people because they were simply people who didn't want to risk their career and a whole bunch of lies for a felon like Donald Trump, who people saying be messing with little kids. Like nobody wants to align themselves with a person like Donald Trump. Only the Maga P's. Y'all know what that P stand for too. You know.
But when Halligan was the second U.S. attorney appointed on an interim basis, her appointment was challenged. And the judge in this case ruled that because it's a second appointee, that violates.
I'm just going to give you a shout out. My glasses cost more than your rent, okay? Because I know you rent, you MAGA bum.
The appointments clause of the Constitution can't do that, right? It's the judges that have the authority to decide who's the U.S. attorney if the Senate and the president can't get their act together. So because Lindsey Halligan's appointment was unlawful, and because she personally went into the grand jury and
her appointment was unlawful. Do you MAGA people even know what unlawful is? I mean, you're running around here committing crimes everywhere, storming the Capitol, doing all of these illegal activities. Do y'all know what unlawful is, you big dummies? Now, this isn't for the regular people in the chat, but I have to set these mega trolls on their way because they really think they can come in here with this bullshit and I eat them up every time. So do y'all know what it means? I know y'all storm the Capitol and do all the illegal stuff that y'all do. Go to Google and look it up, okay? Illegal.
Presented the charges against Comey and presented the charges against James. All of our actions were void, and those indictments have to be dismissed.
And you mentioned this. Is this the end to this book for FBI Director James Comey? Because
this is the end for MAGA. MAGA has died. Wait a minute. I think I need to do a funeral for MAGA since y'all dead, right? MAGA is dead. Let's have a funeral for MAGA.
We talked a lot about this, the charges, the indictment coming just days before that statute of limitation runs out. Is this the end of the case? Is this dismissed for good against former FBI Director James Comey?
Andy, you nailed it. Potentially, yes. And it's because of statute of limitations. The Comey and James cases are completely different. Unless the government wins on appeal, and believe me, they will certainly appeal to the Fourth Circuit and likely the U.S. Supreme Court because this is a constitutional issue. The James Comey indictment can't be refiled because the Department of Justice waited until the 11th hour, just days before that 5-year statute of limitations was going to run. Because this indictment is void, it can't go back to the grand jury and get a new indictment. Now, the James case is very different. They still have time. Another prosecutor who's validly appointed can go refile those cases. And Letitia James doesn't have this same statute of limitations argument. So as far as Comey is concerned, this is a huge win potentially. The case may be done. Letitia James, not so much. Again, another prosecutor that doesn't have these appointments issue can represent the case and get an indictment, and that case will move forward. Now, of course, they both have their other arguments. We've talked about it: the selective vindictive prosecution, the statements to the grand jury, potentially privileged materials in the Comey case. But at least as far as a procedural win, this is potentially a huge one for Comey and his defense team.
This is a huge win. Like I said, Maga has died and didn't even have life insurance. Do you guys know anybody who passed away that didn't have life insurance? I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do, especially if you are MAGA, uneducated, honey. I know you probably don't have life insurance because those MAGA folks, they so ignorant. They have no common sense. They following a 34 or 36. I mean, it really don't matter. A felon is a felon, and you got all of them felonies. You all follow some idiot like that who has been accused. No, he hasn't been accused. He's been found guilty of the R word. Great. Okay. He's been found guilty of that, but this what y'all support. Not only do you support a man that's been found guilty of rape, you support a man who was besties with Jeffrey Epstein. And Jeffrey said that Donald Trump, Donnie, was with one of those victims. But you all support it, though. Little nasty folks. MAGA is nasty, okay? Let's just call it what it is. MAGA is a bunch of filthy, dirty maggots, okay? Y'all real dirty. Y'all dirty, you're broke. Did you get your food stamps? Did y'all get y'all food stamps? Because Thanksgiving is tomorrow. I know y'all want to eat. Ooh,
The New York Attorney General Letitia James is calling it just that, a win, as she said on social media that I'm heartened by today's victory and grateful for the prayers and support I have received from around the country. I remain fearless in the face of these baseless charges as I continue to fight New Yorkers every single day. I mean, you mentioned just the different facets that the defense was going around, both for former FBI Director James Comey and James. Does this add any weight to that? The fact that this person that the judge says dismissed because she was wrongfully appointed or appointed incorrectly, does that give weight to any other of James's defenses if another charge is brought?
Not necessarily, and I'm sure this is
I promise y'all come in here just to say your little racist stuff. That's why I dragged the F-U-C-K out of you hoes. What does a black man got to do with you MAGAs being nasty? What does the black man have to do with any of this? Huh? I know you want to suck what the black man got down there. Why you talking about the black man? Okay, keep talking about the black man because he got what you don't got. Okay. Yeah.
Wynn and Abby Lowell, who represents both of them, should be happy for his client, Letitia James. But this is just purely a procedural issue. It may just be a speed bump in her case. I don't think it's going to be dispositive necessarily. As long as there's someone else in that office who's duly appointed, go back into that grand jury, get a new indictment. Because again, the dismissal was without prejudice. That means it can be refiled. So Tish James should be careful about doing a victory lap just yet. She may ultimately get there, but I don't think she's quite there today.
I asked you this last time because we were talking about that potential misconduct, saying the grand jury didn't really see the full effect of some of the indictments against the former FBI director. What's next for Lindsey Halligan? Is this a black mark against her, or is this just an appointment, like you mentioned, a procedural note?
This is a huge embarrassment for the DOJ and Lindsey Halligan. Let's be honest. I know there's a lot of people watching that don't like James Comey, Republicans, even Democrats. A lot of them blame Comey for Hillary Clinton losing that first election against Donald Trump. But if the DOJ really wanted to go after Comey for the leak to the Wall Street Journal, they should have done so in a timely manner in 2017 when Trump was first president. Attorney General Bill Barr and his team should have done it because they would have been within the 5-year statute of limitations. They would have gone after Comey for really what they care about, which is the leak itself. Let's not forget this case, the statute had run. So they're trying to get Comey for lying about the leak to Congress. And they waited until the 11th hour. They appointed someone with no prosecution experience whatsoever. For first time going to the grand jury is presenting one of the biggest cases that the DOJ is handling, certainly in recent history. So had they not waited so long, had they not appointed someone who had never done this before, we wouldn't have this problem. This is why you need experienced prosecutors handling important cases. Really unforced errors here that were unnecessary. Setting aside the merits of the case and the defenses, I could tell you, Andy, that I've gone to the grand jury probably 100 times. Really, this is just, I mean, it's pro forma. You never have these issues at the grand jury level. And the fact that we have so many and the DOJ is on the defense and not offense like it should be is a big problem and really just goes to show how poorly this case has been handled because, again, they're scrambling at this late day when it really should have been done many years ago with someone who has the experience handling this type of case.
Not just the 11th hour, but the 11th hour and potentially the 59th minute. They were waiting till the very end to bring these charges. What comes next, Nima? Is there anything else that you'd like to note? Anything else that we should be paying attention for or watching for over the next several weeks in terms of both of these cases?
Well, the Comey case, especially, and they got to appeal to the Fourth Circuit, and then, of course, all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's really the only path to revive that indictment. Again, they can't get a new indictment because it'll be too late. They have to rely on that old indictment. So expect a lot of litigation on this appointments clause. And look, for years, the DOJ has had these interim appointments, and it really hasn't been a big deal. No one's challenged it. And that was one of the arguments that they've made. So there's certainly the possibility that a higher court will reverse this order and the Comey prosecution will continue. But this is really dispositive, this appeal, because of the statute of limitations. Then, of course, we'll see the other defenses that we've been talking about over the past several weeks. Was this vindictive or selective prosecution? Was there attorney-client privilege materials accessed? And then, of course, was Halligan's statements to the grand jury, was that improper? Is that another basis? So this is just the beginning of a lot of litigation when it comes to these indictments, Andy.
Yeah, the beginning, the middle, and the end, but this is closer potentially to the end, especially involving the former FBI Director James Comey, as the judge ruling dismissing these cases as Lindsey Halligan illegally appointed according to that ruling. All right, Nima, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, people, you are driven by hate. And it is really a shame that, we live in a world of people that literally you can lay everything out for them and they will find something wrong with it. Now y'all talking about the judge been paid off. Why would the judge need to be paid off when the woman was illegally performing a duty that she was not supposed to perform? So the judge, so you saying then the judge was, this is how delulu, you MAGA people with no brain, you're uneducated. So you're saying that the judge was paid off, right? So if the judge was paid off, and watch and see how y'all so dumb, you can't even follow this. So the judge was paid off. Okay, let's run with that crazy narrative. That's how I know y'all Trump supporters. So if the judge was paid off, then what basis does the judge have to even use what she or he used to say, hey, we gotta throw this case out? Now, keep in mind, the judge didn't totally get rid of the case because they can come back and file it. So don't you think if the judge was paid off, the judge would just totally say, this case is done, at least? Does that even make sense? But y'all so crazy that you don't even have common sense to think about that because you live in your delulu brain, okay? Yeah. So the judge was paid off, but the judge is going to just allow this case to come back again. Y'all so dumb. You can't even think that far. Okay. Now, what the judge simply cited was law. So are you saying then the judge created the law and pushed it back pushed it back before the judge knew that this case was going to happen? What is the hell are y'all talking about? Hello? Y'all really need to go to school, get educated so you don't sound so stupid, because hey, people do get paid off. That does happen, but make it make sense. You guys are default crazy Trump supporters because the shit y'all say, it doesn't even make sense. It gotta at least make sense. Do that make sense? I'm sure it don't, because y'all are slow. The judge wasn't paid off. Come on now. Why would the judge? In fact, if I think I'm correct. Wasn't it a Republican judge? Like, y'all just be making up this shit. Y'all make up this crazy Delulu stuff that nobody believes but your fellow Republican Delulu person. Yeah, that's not true. The judge wasn't paid off, darlings. Go get you some food now that you have your quest, and eat so that when you talk, it actually makes sense.
Some breaking news this hour. A judge has dismissed the cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. It's coming after that federal judge ruled that a prosecutor was unlawfully appointed to her role. I want to bring in our law enforcement and intelligence correspondent, Tom Winter, who's standing by for us. Tom, if you will, bring us up to date as to how we got here to this moment.
Right. So there's been a number of different challenges that we've had here, Yasmin, to this particular case. And Comey had argued against the indictment on several different fronts, saying that it was selective and vindictive. And then he was arguing against the indictment because he said the appointment of Lindsey Halligan, who at one point was counsel to current President Donald Trump when he was going through his legal troubles prior to the election, saying that that appointment was not valid, and arguing that before the court. And so this is just one of several challenges. And on this front, we now have a ruling from Judge Cameron Currie, a senior U.S. District Judge, saying the appointment of Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. Attorney violated the law and the Appointments Clause of the Constitution. All actions flowing from Ms. Halligan's defective appointment, including securing and signing Mr. Comey's indictment, were unlawful exercises of executive power and are hereby set aside. The judge went on to say that the Attorney General's attempts to ratify Ms. Halligan's actions were ineffective, and those are also set aside. And so the motion to dismiss the indictment is granted in accordance with the order, and the indictment is dismissed without prejudice. That means technically that the Justice Department can try to bring these charges again when a U.S. attorney is properly installed in the Eastern District of Virginia, where they sought to bring this case. Bit of an asterisk on that, though, because this case was kind of rushed to completion before the grand jury because the statute of limitations concerns. And so now the question is, has that time run? Was there some sort of an agreement here where the Justice Department says, well, wait a minute, we had an opportunity to respond to this. There were challenges, and so we should be able to get that time back to bring an indictment. That's a step that we're just not clear on at the moment. On top of that, another indictment that obviously got a lot of attention against New York's Attorney General Letitia James. That indictment also dismissed on the same grounds and the same type of arguments that Lindsey Halligan was not appropriately appointed to U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. That case is a little bit different because of some of the conduct that's been alleged there. That case, it is possible, could be brought again with a properly installed U.S. Attorney. You're looking at Lindsey Halligan, a photograph of her there. The Comey case, there's still some other challenges that remain outstanding, including on that selective and vindictive prosecution. So we expect to hear from that as soon as this week from the judge in that case to be able to look at that, or the judge rather that's reviewing that issue, to look at that and then be able to make a ruling on that. So as far as Comey's concerned, not all of the orders are in. This one appears to be quite clear and is final as far as this particular indictment, which is the idea of these particular charges and this particular conduct now dismissed without prejudice, and still a bit of an open question, as I mentioned, as to whether or not they can be brought again. If the statute of limitations time has come up, Yasmin, that means that's it as far as that conduct. And if the Justice Department is going to try to bring charges against Comey, who was fired during the first Trump administration, obviously somebody the President of the United States views as a foe, well, they're going to have to go about it a different route.
Hey, Tom, just so I'm clear on this. So my understanding is, in fact, as you mentioned, they may not be able to bring up these specific charges once again for James Comey because of that statute of limitations. But when it comes to the New York Attorney General Letitia James, in fact, that statute of limitations does not necessarily exist. So these particular charges could be brought up once again.
That's what without prejudice means. It means that you have an opportunity to bring those charges again. And so that's something that we'll have to look at. But at least my initial look at the ruling here is that for the New York Attorney General, she's not quite out of the woods yet as far as future indictment. Whatever other legal challenges she faces, those can also be heard by the court as well. So it's not totally settled for her. For James Comey, obviously, there's going to be some more watching of the dockets and also to see what the Justice Department does in terms of those statute of limitations.
Tom Winter, if you will, stand by for me. I want to bring in senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake as well, who's standing by for us at the White House. Garrett, the president has been pretty outspoken as to wanting the Justice Department to go after his quote-unquote perceived enemies, former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Tish James being two of them. Now that these indictments have in fact been dismissed, Lindsey Halligan being the former special assistant to the president, what are we hearing from the White House?
Nothing yet from the White House on the dismissal of these indictments or from the president himself, who I think will probably comment before the White House press office does, given how personal these investigations and indictments were to him. Yasmin, it's not just that Lindsey Halligan, the attorney here, had worked for the president before he became president again and in his White House, but she was handpicked for this role. Folks might remember that it was on a social media post that the president wrote seemingly directly to his attorney general, Pam Bondi, in which he said that Lindsey Halligan was the person who should take on this role. Bondi, the attorney general, then moved quickly, although perhaps too quickly, it seems now, to fill this U.S. attorney's post in Virginia with Ms. Halligan to proceed with these cases. I think it's possible, Yasmin, this will also continue to fuel frustration within the White House towards the DOJ, which has been kind of at the front line in a negative sense on so many news stories related to this administration in recent days, from their handling of the Epstein files now to seeing these indictments dismissed. It's the kind of thing that's going to frustrate the president and the people around him if past is prologue.
Garrett Haake, stand by for me as well. Want to bring in NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach. Gary, you were inside the courtroom for these repeated hearings, especially last week as well, in which the judge was weighing as to whether or not to dismiss these indictments. What has stood out to you in these proceedings?
Well, there's been so many issues related to the grand jury proceedings in James Comey's case. And I think what happens here is a sort of result of all of those issues combined. You had one where the grand jury observer there was not correctly giving the indictment that the grand jury, the 12-person grand jury, had actually seen to the judge. So Lindsey Halligan perhaps signed an indictment that the entire grand jury didn't actually see. And then you have issues of perhaps missing minutes in a transcript that was brought up by Judge Currie in one of these cases. So perhaps the court reporter may not have been in the room where this all happened. So it was several different issues here. But this all comes back to the 120-day interim U.S. attorney rule. And that's the specific reason why this judge here today is finding that Lindsey Halligan's appointment as U.S. attorney is invalid, because she says you cannot appoint successive U.S. attorneys one after another if they are interim. They have to be appointed and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And that is an important part here. She says, quote, "I conclude that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as an interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid, and that she's been unlawfully serving in that role since September 22nd. Now, that's an important date because James Comey was indicted several days after September 22nd, which is why she is finding his indictment to be invalid and throwing that out. And she's doing the same thing with Letitia James's case.
Gary, quickly take us back to last week, the moment in which it was revealed that, in fact, Lindsey Halligan did not get the entire grand jury to sign off on that James Comey indictment. What was the reaction inside that courtroom?
It was a remarkable scene there because this happens all the time, all over the country. A U.S. attorney signs an indictment, she gives it to the judge, and then the judge affirms it there after a grand jury brings down that indictment. That is not what happened here. What happened here is that there was two different copies. One had 3 counts and one had 2 counts because the grand jury did not indict on one of the 3 counts. So the grand jury coordinator just edited the document, took off one of the 3 counts, and then put the document towards Lindsey Halligan. She signed it, and it went right to a judge. The grand jury never saw that second indictment, and that is a significant issue. That's what Tom was talking about as one of the other issues in this case. There's several different motions that, frankly, don't matter as much anymore because of this decision here. Of course, this could all get appealed.
Gary Grumbach, stand by for me as well. Want to bring our Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell, who's joining us by phone. Kelly, before I get to you, I want to read the statement that we're getting in from New York Attorney General Letitia James, in which she says, "I am heartened by today's victory and grateful for the prayers and support I have received from around the country." She goes on, "I remain fearless in the face of these baseless charges as I continue fighting for New Yorkers every single day. Help put this moment in context for us, Kelly.
Good to be with you, Yasmin. This is really a huge setback for the president and his view of how he can push the Department of Justice to go after his perceived political enemies. Letitia James, the Attorney General, a Democrat in New York, has been someone who has drawn the ire of the president for a long time. She won a significant judgment against him and his family business in New York. James Comey has been an outspoken critic of the president since he left the job as FBI director. He was fired by Donald Trump. This is about President Trump using his power in ways that a court has now said exceeded his authority. As we heard the details from our colleagues about the 120-day rule, this means a personally selected attorney who had been an insurance attorney and a staffer in the White House, never a prosecutor, was installed in this position because the president wanted her to be there. The court finds that they did not follow the law in how that was done. And then everything that comes from it is now tossed aside. Now, as we have been discussing, it is possible because of the way this was dismissed, that charges could be brought again. But that takes us back to why was Lindsey Halligan installed in the first place? Because career prosecutors who had reviewed this material in both cases, did James Comey lie to Congress? Did he obstruct their process? Did Letitia James seek favor in her mortgage rate that was a financial benefit to her? Other prosecutors reviewed that and did not seek those charges. So it's a real question about can these cases go forward? But the big picture in this moment is that the president and his approach to using the powers of his office has been rebuked by a judge, and that is a significant factor. These are two public rivals of the president who are now scoring at least a temporary win, and the president will certainly respond to this. But this is a significant rebuke of how President Trump views his use of the Department of Justice, how Attorney General Bondi conducted herself by appointing Lindsey Halligan. So these are big, far-reaching themes in the use of executive power in the Trump White House. And that applies to many other topics in many other areas. Today we're talking about 2 indictments, but it is significant.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking.
Is there to say everybody is saying the same thing. I know you guys are devout Maga crazies, but at the end of the day, there is protocol that we all have to follow. Even as citizens, we got to follow the law. You just don't get to do whatever the hell you want to do. Now, I know you Maga people, you live in a world that most regular people don't live in, and you storm the Capitol and you do all of you just don't follow rules, you don't follow protocol, you don't really you don't even respect the law, only when it applies to somebody that's doing something to you. That's why I say that you guys are a little off. You're insane, you're uneducated, just not very smart. And I said what I said because I know quite a few people that support Donald Trump. And when you listen to their logic, it's kind of like what you guys put in the chat. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense. But we all have to have somebody to support, whether we crazy or not, right? But James Comey actually had something to say. Let's get into it.
I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence, and a reflection of what the Department of Justice has become under Donald Trump, which is heartbreaking. But I was also inspired by the example of the career people who refused to be part of this travesty. It cost some of them their jobs, which is painful, but it preserved their integrity, which is beyond price. And I know they will serve again. I was very lucky that some of the best lawyers in America stepped forward to represent me. I hope they serve as an example to more and more lawyers, especially at some of the big firms, to participate in protecting our liberty, protecting the rule of law. And my family and friends were always with me, and luckily for me, include some of those great lawyers. This case mattered to me personally, obviously, but it matters most because a message has to be sent that the President of the United States cannot use the Department of Justice to target his political enemies. I don't care what your politics are, you have to see that as fundamentally un-American and a threat to the rule of law that keeps all of us free. I know that Donald Trump will probably come after me again, and my attitude is going to be the same. I'm innocent, I am not afraid, and I believe in an independent federal judiciary, the gift from our founders that protects us from a would-be tyrant. When I was a kid, my parents would wake us up for school every morning by snapping open the shades and saying, "Time to rise and shine and show the world what you're made of." Well, it's that time, America. It's time to stand up and show the fools who would frighten us, who would divide us, that we're made of stronger stuff, that we believe in the rule of law, that we believe in the importance of doing things by the law. So stand tall, shine, and keep the faith.
And like I just said, follow the law. There goes that word again. Listen, we all got to follow the law, I don't know why you wouldn't want to, because they're there for a reason. What president can you call out other than Donnie Boy that gets in office and goes against people, like trying to get people locked up? You would think a president with as many felonies as he has, he needs to never say the word jail, considering that his ass need to probably be in somebody's jail. With those amount of felonies, and he continues to break the law. But again, it's okay for them. It's just not okay for you. So Donald Trump is okay with breaking the law. He's okay with going after people, but he's going to use that very law to try to target everybody that he don't like. We don't need anybody like that. We don't need a president like that. We don't need him around. Donald Trump needs to go. And that is why these cases were dismissed, because he's messy, he's unprofessional, he's a convict. They say he messed with children. He was actually sued for rape. So he's a horrible individual. I don't care how you slice it. I don't care how you look at it. He's just a horrible person. He's tacky. He has no ethics. He does what the hell he wants. The crazy part about this, if this had been Obama, it couldn't have been Obama, because it just wouldn't have never been Obama. But just go and take a mirror and look at yourself, and just look at yourself first, okay? And if you are one of the people that are a hardcore Donald Trump supporter, look at yourself and say in the mirror why you support Donald Trump. Because I wouldn't give a damn if you were a Republican, if you were a Democrat, if you were an independent. How could you support somebody that has been convicted, found guilty of rape? How do you do that? Oh, but y'all gonna say it was a scheme that Todd set up. Todd ain't got shit to do with this. Y'all gonna say it was a scheme, right? Okay, because Donald Trump didn't really do that. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, why are you so delusional? Okay, why is it that you are following behind a man that is literally hurting people? I know y'all, you talk about the immigrants and all of this crazy stuff. Everybody that was snatched up off the street, they wasn't a criminal, they wasn't illegal. You are snatching mothers out of the car with their kids, taking their kids to school, picking their kids up. Everybody is not a criminal. But you know who is a criminal? Donald Trump is a criminal, okay? He's a criminal. And if you support him, you are a damn fool.